that I would like to introduce to you. He is probably the most significant, or the most well-known, should we say, of our Civil War veterans from Maquoketa. And he's going to be here to tell you all about his life and his experiences. So I would like to introduce, if I could, Captain A.W. Drips.
Have to excuse the glasses. Unfortunately, my contacts, I can't read as well with them as I'd like, so I'm going to have to use these to do some of the things I'm doing here. But I'm going to start by talking about the uniform first.
Microphone?
Okay? Oh, I'm sorry?
Microphone?
Oh.
I don't think everyone can hear you.
I'm going to start by talking about the uniform first. As you can see, I'm wearing the Union blue, okay? This is a typical sackcloth worn by officers. Some have listed War II, but if you'll notice that when you see movies and stuff, you're going to see organizations that have different markings on them. That would be artillery, and it would also be cavalry. Now, they wore a shorter jacket. They wore a jacket that only went down just a little below their waist. The reason for that is, well, when you're riding on a horse, you don't want this big jacket on, okay? It's uncomfortable, it's unwieldy, you can't fight. As far as the artillery, they also needed to be very, very flexible in what they were doing while they were loading weapons and so on. And they just didn't want extra stuff there, okay? So they needed to be a little cleaner. So I'm going to talk about some of the equipment I got on here. And bear with me, I'm still working on a couple issues, including my belt. This particular thing is not a sword, it's a saber. And different organizations had different sabers. Infantry had a fairly straight saber, okay? And the cavalry had a shorter but more arced saber, as much as 4 or 5 inches difference. And that again goes back to the riding on a horse. They didn't want to reach all the way down and pull it all the way up here. It's just too hard, right? So if they have to resort to their sword as a weapon, they want to be able to get it out quick and use it. First of all, it's not their primary weapon. Their carbine would be their first weapon. For those of you who are familiar with carbines, carbines are a rifle, but they're shorter. They generally fire smaller bore ammunition as well. As a matter of fact, they will use the same ammunition that I carry in my pistol. So that's the saber. If you notice, it's got very nice markings on it, engravings and so on. It says U.S., where are we at over here? E pluribus unum, and so on. Now this is in fact a replica of an infantry officer saber, okay? Very similar to what would have been used by Captain Drips or any of the other officers in that line. As you got up into the higher ranks, some of the weapons and some of the clothing changed. You'll notice that the general officers, they had double-breasted. Well, actually, that started around the rank of colonel, which would be a regimental commander. From that point on, you wore buttons on both sides. Okay? I'm going to take my belt off here. There's several parts on this belt. One is the straps that carry the saber. This is an ammunition pouch. Now, I wouldn't keep ammunition the way you think of today, and certainly not the same ammunition they carried for their muskets. It was a cartridge. All right, first of all, I have a carry permit. Because this is a legitimate weapon. Although it's a replica of the 1861 Army Colt, this is a legitimate weapon. You could go hunt deer with this. Okay, it's a .45 caliber. what they call ball and cap. Now the reason for that is, on top right here is a little thing called a nipple. And that's what they put, basically a little cap. It's a brass cap with gunpowder in it. So when you fired the weapon, and this is a double action weapon, which means that you have to, I gotta use my hand, I dislocated this thumb. Okay, to fire this weapon, you actually have to cock it all the way back. There's a thing called half cock, okay? Not used that much, but you have to cock it all the way back. When you cock it, it rotates the cylinder, just like any revolver would do, maybe today. And when you fire it, you look down it just like you would a revolver. But inside there is not a bullet. There's powder and a ball, and usually wadding. It's a piece of cloth. Basically, you separate the powder and the cartridge or the bullet, which is a round bullet. Now, with the...
Do you want to use this?
It might help. Oh, wrong hand. Oh, yeah, that'll help. Okay, so with this particular piece, unlike what they used for the mini balls, where they had basically a paper wrap tube, they tear it off, put it down into the barrel, the powder would go down, the mini ball would go in on top of it, and then you would pack it down tightly. The mini ball was a little unique. Instead of having the ball, it was shaped kind of like a bullet. And it had 3 ridges. The reason for that is inside the back of the mini ball was wood. Now the reason for wood is it compresses. When you put it in, it seals tightly, but you got to remember one of the problems with balls is it would come out the barrel because they weren't exactly the same size as the barrel like today's weapons. So it's bouncing down the barrel like this, and you don't know where it's going to go when it comes out the end. Okay, whichever direction it's going, that's where the ball's going to go. Which is why they still fought with old Napoleonic tactics of a whole line of people about from here to that wall, all firing at each other and hoping you hit something. Okay? And I figure if I fire down here, I may not get the guy I'm aiming at, but I get the guy to the left or the guy to the right. So, you know, it is what it is. So the wood, when it was fired, the wood would expand, sealing the ball off in the chamber, keeping it, and because of the grooves in the barrel, it now became your rifle bullet. It was the first rifle bullet you've seen in history. And they became very accurate. Those particular weapons, you could fire 300 to 350 yards and pretty much hit what you were aiming at. So that was a good thing. You've seen Clint Eastwood, when he goes to change out the cylinder, you see him do this, pull it back, right? He pushes a button over here, pulls the cylinder out, puts it away, puts a new cylinder in, closes it up, lacks it, cocks it, he's ready to fire 6 more shots. So my pouch would carry at least 1, if not 2 additional cylinders. Because it takes forever to load this bloody thing, okay? Because everything you have to do, you have basically a pouch of powder, kind of a stem, and then like a bulb that's flat. So what you would do is there's 2 levers on it. You would tip it over, holding 1 lever. That would stop the powder from going all the way out. Then you would push the other lever, tip it back up. Now you've trapped the powder in between those 2 levers. You tip it back over again, release the first lever, and it drops it down into the cylinder. Then you take and you rotate the cylinder and you pack it down. You rotate it back, put the ball in, pack it down, and you're ready to go. You got to do it 6 times just to this one cartridge, or this one cylinder. So you can imagine, this is not something I'm going to say, hold on guys, I know you, the guys in gray, would you stop for a second? I got to reload. Yeah. Ain't going to happen. So that's why you always carry a spare one. The officers originally were issued this weapon for a different reason. This is 1861. There were previous weapons that they used, but this particular weapon is an 1861 Army Colt. Officers were issued it because, one, like the saber, it shows their status. So it told you who they were. They were in command. But it was also because 1 in 3 horses died. And that's how you put them down. So that's one of the major reasons they got this. If you notice, it said also, so it's like this. That's because while I'm carrying my saber and giving directions to my troop, leading them into battle, if I'm doing this, and I see signals from flags that say they want us to wheel left, and you're going to hear about what the Ninth did when they wheeled left and approached the lines, because they were actually in a crossfire. So they wheeled left to approach the Confederates, and as they're doing that, I'm doing this. And as I start to go to the left, the person right behind me carrying the colors does that, and everybody follows your colors. So this is as much a communication device as it is a use the pointy end into the other guy device. Okay? But if I've got this, and now I'm just a few feet from battle, I can switch the saber to my other hand, reach in, and pull my weapon out, and I'm ready to go. That's why. Okay?
Did they have relative the opposite for if you were left-handed?
No.
You just had to learn.
There was no, we didn't have that consideration back then, the consideration of everybody's feelings. No, this is war.
Okay.
There's no feelings in war. The hat I'm wearing is a different hat than you're used to seeing. It's called a hardy hat. Now, I'm wearing it because that's what Captain Dripps wore in the picture we have in the museum. And I was trying to emulate him as much as possible. So this is called a hardy hat. Now, I have yet to do one thing to it that I haven't yet done, and that is to tip up the side and put the regimental sign here. It looks like the Australians wore a hat. You've seen those, right? Well, that's what the hardy hat was. It was really pre-Civil War, carried into the Civil Wars, were both by the North and the South. But they didn't like it because it was heavy, it was uncomfortable. And so eventually they went to the Kennedy cap. They had another version that was even higher and bigger, and it was called a forage cap. Well, what do you think they used a forage cap to do? To forage. They go around looking for anything they could find to eat, because the military wasn't able to provide all the food that everybody needed. Flour, beans, you're on your own after that. Okay? Apples were a big deal in season. You got sick of them by the end of the summer, trust me. But you would go around collecting whatever you can and bring it back, because what you brought back was what everybody in your little group, your troop, ate. If you notice the insignia on the front, it's the same as mine. You'd think that's, a musician. No, it's not. That actually signifies artillery. Infantry. Now, nowadays, it's cross rifles. The cross rifles in the old days was actually the cavalry. Okay? So, this element here talks about the infantry. Above it, you see a letter. What is that letter? Anybody see it? A. Okay, A. That's because I was the commander of Company A of the 9th, notice on my lapels, the number 9, 9th Iowa Infantry Volunteers. Okay? Typically when I'm at the field, I would be wearing this. This is really more of a dress hat, and as I'm working on getting all these elements together, because I'm learning this as everybody on the group is, we're learning a lot of stuff that we didn't know before. There's actually a plume that goes up on this side as well. So, all right. Now, this doesn't go very far, so I'm going to walk over and have this young lady over here feel this and tell you what she feels. Come up where they can hear you. What do you think?
Ooh, must be wool.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. Lightweight? Lightweight wool?
Medium weight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was a good thing to wear?
Well, it breathes. And it's warm and it breathes.
It breathes, therefore it keeps you cool in the summer, believe it or not. It also keeps you warm in the winter. But they get really heavy when they get soaking wet. Okay? So, this is the blouse, or what they call a sack cloth, a sack coat. And below, they wore their pants differently back then. A little higher than I would normally like to wear them. And notice the suspenders to hold them up. No belts. Nobody wore belts back then. Okay? Suspenders are a little more common around this part of the world than it is in, say, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. You know, they don't wear them. But around here it's common. It's part of our culture in this area. But getting into this thing, I'm going to tell you that I'd like to get into my chem warfare unit that I wore back in the military, because that was actually easier than getting all this stuff on. The blue pants, now, I could have gotten dark blue pants with a light blue stripe, or I could get the light blue pants with the dark blue stripe. I wore this because it was more common and because we didn't have a reference for Captain Drips. That's the reason I picked this color. Okay? But as you got up into the officer's ranks, brigade commander, which is generally going to be a brigadier, a first star general. Anybody here know what brigadier is? They start wearing, well, starting at colonel, they start wearing the double breast, or the double look. They also start wearing vests underneath, okay? And they also wore the dark blue pants as well as the dark blue top, okay? So that's kind of the uniform that the Union wore. I'm going to think if there's anything else. I think that covers that. And usually, I cheated on this. I'm going to put my foot up here, if I can. That's the broken leg. These are not exactly authentic. These are combat boots from the 1990s, so. But they would normally wear a boot that was square-toed. They could be worn by either foot. And once you broke them in, then you know which foot they went to. But you had to kind of keep track of it, so that as you took them off at night, you knew which one went on which foot, so that you didn't put on the wrong foot and get it all messed up. Okay? But yeah, the boots were exactly the same. They made one kind of boot, and only about 3 sizes. So sometimes you get your toes cramped, sometimes you had way too much in there. And I'll tell you what, as a member of the military, I can tell you right now, one of the things you really always take care of is your feet. You always wear dry socks, change them regularly. That didn't happen here. The issues with regards to medical and so on like that, and other things just weren't known. So, all right. I'm going to get back now to a little more. Well, any questions on what I've brought up so far? Anybody want to know anything about what we discussed? Okay.
Are the blue pants also wool?
Yes. Same material.
Okay.
So it's so in here, in a hot parade.
Yeah. So what's the blouse then? Is that cotton?
It's linen.
Linen. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a whole breathable outfit.
It's a very well. I mean, think about Saudi Arabia. What do they wear? Very long flowing clothes, and it's hot as heck. Well, why do they wear that? Because having things. If you look how big these pants are. I don't have to take my boots off to put these damn things on. I mean, I can slide right into it. It's a piece of cake because they're that loose. Well, they weren't there to be a fashion statement. They were there to make you look similar, uniform, and to provide a function, not a fashion statement. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Where were these uniforms manufactured?
I bought these through C&C Sutlery.
But during the actual Civil War, where were they woven?
Most of those were done in the Northeast, Boston and so on, New Hampshire, Connecticut. They had most of the weaving mills back then. Okay, that's one of the areas where the South had a problem. That's why with the South, they wore gray, right? Not always. As a matter of fact, the first uniform that our home guard wore, which was, we had the Confederates were going to attack Iowa from the south. Over in an area, over down south, down the southwest of here, okay? Because there was a shipment coming in of weapons, ammunition, and food. So the Confederates were going to come across the river and try to get this stuff. Well, the Iowa governor called out the Home Guard. Now, the Home Guard back then was essentially a state militia. Each state put their uniform, uniform on. They felt appropriate. Some states, they wore blue. Some states, they wore gray, patterned after the U.S. Army Military Academy. So you can imagine, well, and Iowa's were gray, so were Wisconsin's. Now Michigan, they made this hat famous. Folded up, they noticed the Iron Brigade. They became known as the Black Hats. That was their name, the Iron Brigade for Michigan. So anyway, when we first started the war, go back to Home Guard. So the Home Guard was called out, which means guys with any kind of weapon they had, pitchforks, whatever, okay? To stop the Confederates from coming across the river to take the stuff in the armory, which they were successful at. And then President Lincoln says, we need 75,000 volunteers. So the first call goes out and people start joining, okay? And that's where I got involved. And I'm gonna read that to you as we go along. But I want to take a little story on uniforms. When the war started at the first Battle of Bull Run, which that's a Union name for it, the Confederates called it Manassas. Because the Confederates named things after local areas, towns, and so on. Shiloh was named after Shiloh Creek, or Shiloh Church. The Union called it Pittsburgh Landing, because that's where they had a depot on the Mississippi River where they got off, so they called it that. So these side you'll hear these battles sometimes talked about, and they'll say this battle, we'll talk about it, and then they'll say this battle, we'll talk, and you go, wait, that sounds like the same story. Well, it is. It's just a different name, depending on who was writing the history. So anyway, when they started the war, the first Battle of Bull Run, which was the first really major confrontation, imagine this. We got a guy, he's a captain, he's wearing this because he was issued this uniform because of his company. But the rest of his company was wearing gray. They're from Massachusetts. And a runner comes back, and he says, they're almost here. He goes, okay, who is it? I don't know. Well, what were they wearing? Gray, the same as us. He goes, okay, let's get behind these logs and prepare for this. So they're lining up behind these logs. The other group gets within about 50 yards. The captain stands up and says, yo, who goes there? Where are you from? The answer, where are you from? We're Massachusetts men. The other side fired at these guys because they were Confederates. So one of the things they did to help that, this was done by Virginia, I believe. They would take bed rolls or bedding. They would tear strips of bedding off and put a white strip around their arm here. They would put a white strip around the base of their cover, whichever kind of hat they had. And they were told, to those who served in the military, there's called a challenge. You ask a challenge. Who won the World Series in 1947? You know, whatever the case may be. And you have to answer the question. So I say blue, you say red, okay, you come on in, you're good. Well, the response for the Confederates was for home and country. That was their response. If they did that, you knew they were for Virginia, they were on, well, you knew they were on your side or they weren't on your side, but you knew that. So, okay? Anything else? All right, well, let's talk a little bit about Captain Drips himself and the night. Specifically, Company A. Okay, well, I guess we've got to start at the beginning, so we'll start with the fact that I was born on March 4th, 1926 in a little town called Laughlinstown, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania. Now, since you guys don't know where Westmoreland County is, because I don't know where half the counties of Iowa is, I wouldn't expect you to know Pennsylvania that well. It's right southeast of Pittsburgh. So, my father's name was William. He was of Irish descent. My mother's name was Martha Clark, and she was Scotch. We lived in Westmoreland County until about 1850, where we moved to Garnavillo Township in Clayton County, Iowa. My father died on March 18th, 1881. I would never see that because, as you can hear later, I died well before that. He was 92, and he was a pensioner of the War of 1812. Mom died on April 12, 1874. She was 82. Now that's 92, 82, that's pretty old for those days. They did pretty good, considering the average age was only in the 50s back then. So, all right. They had 5 sons, 6 daughters. That's the Irish. Robert, my brother, died in 1856. He was 34. James died when he was just a young child. John was actually adopted. He died in Memphis Hospital in the fall of 1862 because he was serving on the side of the North. He was a member of the 9th Infantry as well. Thomas, my brother Thomas, was captain of Company E, the 27th Iowa. So he was a younger brother, so he came in later musters of continuing regiments that would be brought up. He died in Clayton, Iowa soon after the end of the war, and my youngest brother Joseph died in Malone, Iowa. He was nearly blind because of an accident that happened in the war. He was member of the 6th Iowa. At about 16, I became apprenticed to a publisher in Hollidaysburg, Blair County, Pennsylvania. Hadn't moved yet. It was called The Standard. I learned the art of printing, and I remained there until the outbreak of the Spanish, or the U.S.-Mexican War, which was in 1846. I tried to join up, Pennsylvania Volunteers. I was rejected because of ill health. That wasn't anything permanent, it's just that I was sick at the time. They said, no, you can't come in. I was able to join another regiment of Pennsylvania Volunteers, and I served with honor throughout until the close of the war. I was wounded in the thigh during a charge upon a castle at the Battle of Chapultepec in Mexico City on September 12, 1847. I remained in the hospital for about 6 months recuperating. Eventually I returned to Pennsylvania and again entered the printing offices where I had started. During the winter of 1851, I worked for the state printing office. Okay, that's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That's where they have their legislature. I learned phonography. Does anybody know what that is? Phonography? It's kind of a form of shorthand. It's based on sounds. So so you would take it in phonography, and then he would translate it. I would translate it at night and turn it into this department, so they could publish it and keep record of the legislature. From 1849 to 1852, I also commanded the Hollidaysburg Guards. They were a small group, kind of a militia group, people about the same age as me, in the 30s, late 20s, early 30s. And we practiced and marched and did other things so that we were ready. Between what I did in the Mexican War and what I did because of this is why I ended up being the commander of this unit. On March 21st, 1850, I married a young lady named Margaret Jacobs. In 1852, we moved to Iowa. I was employed as a copyist at the county recorder's office in Garnavillo, which was the county seat at the time. On January 28, 1852, the Clayton County Herald was established, and I was employed as its publisher until August 18, 1854, where I succeeded as proprietor of the paper. I published the Herald until 1856, when the county seat moved to Gutenberg. We, of course, moved there as well. I then just sold out to McBride & Company and moved to Maquoketa in 1858, where I obtained an interest in the Maquoketa Excelsior. While doing that, I also became the postmaster of Maquoketa, but I had to resign on May 28, 1861 to enlist in the Army. I was asked to organize a company of men. Now, a company of men back then was a lot less than it is today, by half. Typical platoon has about 50 people. A company has 4 to 6 platoons. But a company back then, your minimum was 100. You were supposed to get as much as 120, but they would not muster you into it and I had at least 100. I couldn't get it when they first called the muster. I kept working at it and eventually did. Anyway, I organized Company A of the 9th Iowa Infantry Volunteers on August 20th, 1861, and I was elected its captain. So since I didn't go to the military academy, I wasn't commissioned in the regular army. I'm a reservist, if you will, militia. But back then, unless you were appointed, and that was typically done with regimental levels and above, you were actually elected by the people you recruited. Now, I'm sure much of that had to do with my experience in the Mexican War, and also the fact that I commanded another unit at one time, so I probably came across as an individual who kind of knew what they were doing, and if you were going to start a unit, you kind of want to have that. I remained in command until my death on March 7th, 1862, at the Battle of Pea Ridge. All right, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Battle of Pea Ridge and the 9th itself. Nearly half the eligible males in Jackson County at the time of the Civil War volunteered to fight in the war. Company A, the 9th Iowa Infantry, was 101 strong. Just barely made it, but I made it, okay? This is the first company to leave from this area. If you notice I say, because the next company would be attached to a different regiment. And then the next one would be attached to a different regiment. So, in early March of 1862, a little known but pivotal Civil War battle was fought in the northwest corner of Arkansas near the borders of Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. They kind of all come together. You got Missouri sticking up here, you got Arkansas over here, and Oklahoma, so what you've got is 3 corners. Well, the upper northwest corner of Arkansas is where this occurred. Let's see, who are we at here? Now it was called by the Battle of Pea Ridge by the north, and again, Battle of Elkhorn Tavern by the south. The tavern that was there that we were defending had trees behind it, had trees off to the left, had trees way down there. This is the one time the South actually came out and actually charged the Union Army in this particular battle. Most of the battle was the Union pressing the Confederates through the fields and back towards the woods there at the foot of the Big Ridge. Okay, so Elkhorn Tavern, kind of like, it looks a little like a lot of the older buildings in this town. You know, you have a big front porch, 4 columns, a second story. Second story is where the family lived. Downstairs was an open area, that was the tavern. You know, there's other outbuildings around there and stuff like that because it's all farms. So it's basically a gathering place for people in that area. All right, so it resulted in a Union victory, thus preventing Missouri, a border state, from coming under Confederate control. A victory for the South would result in the South having access to St. Louis and control of Mississippi. Rivers back then, like railroads, were the transportation and communication areas. You could not give those up. If they got control of Mississippi up to St. Louis, that would have really damaged the battle on the western part of the United States. So it was critical to keep them out of there. Plus, Missouri, while it was a border state, was still in the north. It was not in the Confederacy. That could change. So it was important in places like that, in Kentucky and Tennessee, to keep those areas under federal control. Otherwise, they could easily go over to the South. That would have been a problem. Company A's story is featured in the Pea Ridge National Military Park in Arkansas, and displayed at the Visitor Center is the sword, saber, belonging to Captain Andrew Drips, the Macokian, who mustered his troops into service. Company A was one of the 10 Eastern Iowa companies that comprised the 9th Infantry. On September 14, 1861, they joined other companies of the 9th Iowa in Camp Union up in Dubuque. That's where they were mustered in, and they were then transported by steamboat to St. Louis, Missouri, where they trained at Benton Barracks. It was an Army site just outside of St. Louis. That's where they all learned to march, and use their weapons of fire, and learn all the courtesies and all the other stuff. So that was where the training actually began. On the first deployment, they were sent to Rolla, Missouri. It's in the northwest corner, or excuse me, kind of the middle southeast of Missouri. And the reason for that is the Confederates, we heard the Confederates were marching up through southern Arkansas and wanted to move up and take over Mississippi and move up to St. Louis. So we had to go out and we had to stop that. So we went to Rolla, Missouri, where we guarded the Pacific Railroad and the Union supply lines that ran from St. Louis down to Rolla. Rolla was essentially the central staging point for that area of the country. We guarded the Pacific, Company A's first action was at Battle of Pea Ridge on March 7th and 8th, 1862. They were on the front lines of the conflict, positioned in front of the Elkhorn Tavern. 7 Jackson County men died and 11 were wounded. Captain Drips was killed on the first day with sword in hand. He was 36 years old. His second in command, Lieutenant Florilla M. Kelsey of Sebula, was wounded. The 9th Iowa suffered 40% of all the casualties for the North in that entire battle. 40%. Other battles that Company A were in included Chickasaw Bayou, Arkansas Post, Jackson, Vicksburg. That's where Captain Kelsey, by the way, was killed. Chattanooga, Resaca, New Hope Church, Kennesaw Mountains, Atlanta, Jonesboro, Savannah, Salaketchee, and Bentonville. What is it? Notice, if you follow a map, what am I doing? I'm moving south and I'm moving east. Why? Because they also were part of Sherman's March to the Sea. They were attached to the Army of Tennessee, which was part of Sherman's March to the Sea. There we go. Company A was served as now there was a parade after the war. So Company A served as an advance guard leading General Sherman down Constitutional Avenue in Washington, D.C. in May 1865 for part of the grand review of the Union armies marching past President Johnson, because this was after Lincoln's assassination, and General Grant. There were 36,000 troops in the parade, and Company A, with 36 of its original 101 volunteers, marched in the most coveted position. They led the parade. On the 25th anniversary of the Battle of Pea Ridge in 1887, the sword was presented to Captain Drips as a send-off ceremony in Congregational Church on August 14th, 1861. The sword of Florilla Kelsey was also given by his son. They hung in the GAR post in Maquoketa until the GAR gave them to Ellis Museum on March 4th, 1836. The Ellis Museum was a private museum and sold its contents in the 1960s. Got 1800 on my brain here. The Drips sword, along with scabbard and great brass mouthpiece, that would be the tip here where the sword goes in, okay? Was purchased by the National Park Service with scabbard engraved and is on display at the case in the Visitor Center at Pea Ridge National Battlefield in northwest Arkansas. The scabbard, this one's metal. The scabbards back then were leather. And we gotta consider how old that is, 150 years old, plus going through battles and stuff. It's fragile at this point in time. Let's see, where are we at? The scabbard was kept in the National Park storage area near Independence, Missouri, as was considered too fragile to display. I have one of these at home, an actual Civil War sword, and I can tell you, it's been taped and repaired in a couple spots. I would never, ever take that out in public. I'd let people see it, but I wouldn't let anybody handle it because, again, it's just too fragile. We don't want to damage it. All right. Let's see what else I get here about Captain Drips. This is some information read by F.J. DeGrush. He read it in 1887 at the 25th reunion of the Battle of Pea Ridge. Captain Drips was the life of his regiment. His experience in the Mexican War, his patriotism, his desire to do his full duty, and his bravery made him a leader in the councils of staff in line. That would be the senior NCOs, mid-grade, the majors, lieutenant colonels, and all the other captains that were in the line. I remember 2 instances which eulogized the wearer that soared equal to hours of praise or pages of paper. At Lebanon, Missouri, while we camped for the night, and at some danger, existing of a sudden attack, Captain Drips called on Colonel Vanderbrand. He was the brigade commander. Throughout all the night and before, tired from the day's march, but he came to the colonel with this salutation. Colonel, is there anything I can do? Well, 20 miles west of Wilson Creek, Missouri, while chasing old Pat Price was a brigadier in the Confederate Army. So they were chasing the Confederates during this particular period of time. Was the first time Company A was ever drawn into the line of battle. Captain Drips remarks to us that morning came from the bottom of his noble heart. Boys, General commanding has assigned this company to a post of honor. We are the advance of the whole Army. Much depends on us. If we waver and run, there is a great danger of demoralizing the whole command. Be cautious, be cool, but shirk no duty and hold our position at any and all costs. I have another quote from William Trout, talking about Captain Drips. He made this following tribute to his old commander, a letter written in 1887 to be read at a meeting held in Maquoketa on the 20th anniversary of the Battle of Pea Ridge. It was at Pea Ridge our beloved Captain Drips gave up his life. It was a sad time, and as I think it all over, it makes me feel sad. But such was the fate of many a brave man. Of Captain Drips, I would say further, he was always with us, never shirking his duty, ever kind and tender, and above all just in dealing with all. I remember when we were camped at Pacific, Missouri, his treatment of disloyal Missourians. He had a piercing eye which could look at a rebel through and through. I have heard him talk to them in such a way that they would crouch at his feet and beg for mercy. He always gave them one chance for their lives, but when brought before him a second time, would send them to, well, I don't know where. I did not go with them. I might speak of several such instances to forbear. The past is the past, and many of the rebels south are under the sod, their souls in heaven, I hope, with the exception of a dozen or so. Had Captain Drips lived, he would have been a colonel of the regiment, as he was so endeared himself to the hearts of us all. No honor was too great to be conferred upon him. Of Lieutenant Kelsey, I could speak of the highest terms of praise. He is always daring, brave, a good disciplinarian, not as cautious and as calculating as Captain Drips, perhaps, but always ready, always to the front in time of danger. He was a man of refined, cleanly habits, and at first thought by some to be putting on a style, being neat and careful in his appearance. He compelled those under him to observe the same rules which caused no little inconvenience. But as we learned to know him, we respected him more and set a good example and were liked by all. I'm going to read a quick poem here to end this and take whatever questions you have. There's a whole lot more here, but I would need another hour, and I know we don't have that. So I will, since I've kind of gotten to finish this here, we'll just finish with this poem. On rocky cliffs in Rebel Land. This poem was sent to Mrs. Drips, as some of the boys presented tonight might like to have her hear it. On rocky cliffs in Rebel Land, where not but forests grow, there came a fierce and warlike band, with cautious tread and slow. With savage eyes and darkened brow, proclaiming their hate, they aimed the deadly cannon's prow, nor thought to end its mate. But see, there comes a chosen few in Union's proud array, whose trust in God full well they know would help them win the day. The carnage opens, and the hail falls thick and fast around, and o'er the heads the bombshells sail, on bursting shake the ground. Among the foremost in the light, was he who led our clan, who called us on to show our might, nor flinch a single man. But first he to raise his voice against the southern mob, who seemed to show it as their choice to murder and to rob. But a deadly musket ball must pierce his manly breast, and with a kind farewell to all he sought the soldier's rest. Tell wife, I bless her as I die, was last our captain said, and soon his noble form did lie, inanimate and dead. And now when national notes do start, our blood to fingertips, we don't forget 'twas sad to part with the hero, Captain Drips. Thank you. Any questions? Yes?
Well, it says you got married, did you ever have any children?
It doesn't say. It doesn't say. I have seen nothing that says he had children. No. I know his wife got remarried afterwards. I forget what her name was. Knight, right, correct. She got married to another gentleman later that night. And it was under the name Knight that she donated a sword. Now, the sword we have that's down in Arkansas is the sword that I carried. We have the Captain Kelsey sword in our museum. The actual sword is down there. Now it's behind glass, so we can touch it because we don't want that. But it's down there, and during the parade, or after the parade, and during our thing in September, I will be in the Historical Society. Hopefully my belt figured it out at that time. And I'm having to drop back 150 years ago. What does this do? But they do the same thing with some of our stuff, right? Anyway, so I'll be down there to talk to kids and parents as they come in, talk about cap and drifts, talk about the uniforms, talk about the different items there, like what cannon shot looked like, what grape shot looked like, and so on and so forth. We'll talk about Captain Kelsey, Captain Drifts, and so on and so forth, and answer any questions they have. And they're going to have to come there because they got to get themselves stamped on the hunt, the scavenger hunt. So if you come there and participate in the scavenger hunt, you're going to have to come and get me to check you off, or you're not going to win any prizes. Any others? Any other questions?
Do you know
No?
any other details that you might know about his involvement with the Excelsior? And I don't know if any copies of that might still exist.
That I don't know. I know that he didn't actually run it. He just became a part owner in it. And while he was part owner in it, I'm sure he had managing pieces to it, but no, his main job was postmaster. But he did, because the money he got before, he saw an opportunity to get involved in the local community, what that means long term. He wasn't postmaster for very long. Because it wasn't long, it was less than a year after he got here that he enlisted, so it's hard to say. I've seen nothing in anything that I have that says he had any children or talks about anything further about his work with the Excelsior. Yes, ma'am.
Unless I missed it, did you say where he was buried, or is buried?
He's buried in Pea Ridge. I don't know that his grave is specifically marked. Do you know?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I researched a little bit about this, and it said that he was buried behind the Elkhorn Tavern in the peach orchard, and then his from the information that we got from the superintendent down there, he was supposed to have been buried then in Clayton County. We have not found his grave. We've been all over Garnervillo and Marquette, and we cannot find. We found his wife's grave, but he was not buried in that cemetery.
So down at Pea Ridge, behind the Elkhorn Tavern, in a peach orchard.
Once.
At once, no, at least at that time. We don't know where he's at now. Anybody else? 'Cause I know we're hitting the top of the hour. Yes, ma'am.
He was born in Pennsylvania, and then he moved to Iowa, and he formed a company, and then he still went and worked for the Pennsylvania group?
No. I didn't follow it completely in sequential order, if you will. No. The things he did in Pennsylvania, including enlisting in the Pennsylvania volunteers and so on, that was all while he was there. He didn't move to Iowa until after he was married. Then he moved here, and that's when he swam Garofalo, and then of course to the other county seat was, and then eventually to Macomb. So no, he didn't move here until after he was married.
But then when he joined, he got his company. Who was he with after that?
What was that?
When he formed the company of the infantry, he was working with Pennsylvania group?
No, that was when he was in Pennsylvania during the Mexican-American War. He enlisted and joined a militia unit there. After that was over with, he also commanded a group of militia, the Hollidaysburg militia, okay? But once he got married, then he moved here. It's just, he did little training while he was there, and he worked for a couple of newspapers and for the state. But eventually he moved here, worked for a newspaper. Then he worked for the county. Then he also moved to another town as the newspaper moved, because the county seat moved, he moved. And then eventually moved here to Macokota, where he bought interest in the Excelsior and became the postmaster.
I want to say that
What was that, ma'am?
After he was at the Excelsior, that's when he joined, or got his company?
Yes, yeah. Excelsior was when he, after moved to Macokota, that's once he got here, and he was involved in the Excelsior, and he was the postmaster, he resigned as postmaster to start the company, and then moved on. Now, I'm sure his wife still had rights with the Excelsior, probably had got bought out or something, I don't know how that would happen back then. Yes?
I want to say that the display with the dripped sword in the other museum is absolutely beautiful. And if anybody hasn't seen it, they should go see it. It is gorgeous.
Anything else? Top of the hour, yes, ma'am.
Did he make very much money doing service then, or how was he paid?
He would have paid the federal government $14 a month.
$14 a month?
Yeah, $14 a month.
For every soldier?
So,
And by his rank, he got?
yeah, I mean, well, back then, everybody signed for the pay. They lined up on payday, they signed a voucher, they were handed cash,
$49 a month more than I make.
and that's it. Okay, now, many times they would mail some of that money home to take care of their
Did you
family.
have anything to do
But
with the making of
that's
the
something they got paid.
case?
And that didn't happen every month. I mean, they tried to, but, you know, I mean, in the middle of battle, they're not gonna say, hold on, I gotta get my paycheck.
Give him a paycheck.
Hold the horses! I need some beer money. Anything else? Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you, very awesome. So I just hope that gives you a little taste of how important Jackson County was in the Civil War. So very important. How important Iowa was in the Civil War. So part of the reason that the Historical Society is having the reenactment in September is to get that knowledge out there, because it seems like today people think, Iowa, what did they have to do with the Civil War? But we had a lot to do with the Civil War. So thank you, Terry, that was awesome. Thank you.